All right, welcome. I want to talk about where each team kind of projects to be next season in the Metropolitan Division. I'm going to go by divisions, probably four separate videos, so I can talk about the teams a little longer. Um, so these are the 8 teams in orange. The number up here means what round they made it to in the playoffs. Hurricanes made it to the Eastern Conference Finals, which is the third round. It's 4 rounds in the playoffs. The Y means the Hurricanes clinched the division. They won the division. The X means they made the playoffs. Like Devils made it to round 2, Rangers round 1, Islanders round 1. Um, these other 4 teams missed the playoffs. Kind of what I'll be projecting per se. If the team is projected to get better, stay about the same, get worse. If they're going to be a fringe playoff team, should be well in the playoffs, or a cup contending team. This is one of the more boring divisions for this type of projection. Obviously, it's still June. The draft hasn't happened yet. Free agency hasn't happened yet. But this could be a good indication as to what these teams do this offseason and what they kind of move towards. So let's get it started. Starting off with the Hurricanes. I don't even know where my colors are. Hurricanes, they're going to stay in the same. I think they're still cup contenders. Hurricanes have a lot of cap space. They have some needs. I think they need to fill out their depth scoring. They need to figure out their goaltending. I think right now it's only Kochetkov is signed as their goaltender, and he's probably not going to be a number one goaltender this year or even a 1B option, probably more of a backup based on play recently. So I don't know what they do with their starting goaltender, but they need one. Whether they resign one they currently have in Ranta or Anderson, or they go out and find someone else like a Connor Hellebuck. This team's kind of interesting. They have a lot of assets. They have a lot of young players. They have a lot of draft picks, and they have a lot of cap space. I don't know if I just said that. So they could make some major moves this offseason in terms of trading for what they need if they can't find it on the free agent market, because there's not a whole lot of options on the free agent market. Canes, I think, will be right back in contention. I think they've been very smart with their cap. They're going to have to spend a little more on their current roster next offseason. But this year, go big or go home. Here we go. Next up, Devils. I got the Devils staying about the same. My biggest question for them is their goaltending. Who do you go with? Is it Schmid? Do you Blackwood? Is he going to be retained? Is his rights going to be traded? Vanacek's fine. I like Vanacek, but I don't think Vanacek or Schmid should be your number one at this point. Schmid showed a lot of potential. Is that sustainable? I don't know. Younger goaltenders, it can be sustainable, but once teams start figuring out the goaltenders, I don't want to say weaknesses, but areas of greater opportunity to score. It can be tough for some goaltenders to adjust, and some do very quickly and figure it out, and some it takes a little longer. So Schmid, there's still some question marks. Vanacek, I don't know if that's your number one guy, but rumors are they're trying to get Connor Hellebuck in New Jersey, and I think if that happens, or if they find a number one goaltender, like if they get a Jeremy Swayman from Boston, for example, there's plenty of options out there in terms of the goaltending carousel we should see this offseason. I think the Devils will be fine, and I, along with re-signing a good amount of their guys and maybe having to replace Haula, I think they're in very good shape to become contenders. The reason I'm saying the same is because they had an excellent season. Any season over 110 points is excellent. I don't see them, beating the Bruins record of best regular season of all time next year, but they're going to still be a top team. That's why I have them at the same. Next up, Rangers. Again, I told you, this division's pretty boring. I think they're going to be about the same again. The Rangers have a very good team. They're going to have some cap issues. I think they have a little over $11 million in cap space, but they still have to sign guys like Keandre Miller, who should command a pretty decent pay increase as well as term. Who else? They got Lafreniere. They have to re-sign. I think he's a restricted free agent. What do you do with his contract? Do you move him? I don't know. I think there's options that the Rangers can approach. I don't know how much better this team will get. They'll likely lose Kane if he doesn't sign a team-friendly deal. They likely lose Tarasenko if he doesn't sign a team-friendly deal. So on paper, the team may get worse, but they also have a new coach, and that can provide a coaching bump to make the team a little more successful than they probably are. We see that pretty often in the NHL. So I'm about the same. I'm torn. I think they're a fringe cup contender. I'm gonna say playoffs for now. Obviously, like this isn't my preseason rankings. That'll come out after free agency is pretty much all summed up. This is just what we can expect teams to do. I think all three of these teams are going to try to make a push to go for it. And unfortunately, we're sticking with the blue. Islanders. There's not a whole lot the Islanders can do because they're pretty tight to the cap. They're in a very defensively oriented structure. It's just one of those teams. They'll hang around. I think they'll be a fringe playoff team, whether they make the playoffs or not. I don't know. It kind of depends what the rest of the division does, in my opinion. I don't see the Islanders making a big splash. I'm sure they'll try to, but I don't know how successful they'll be in making that splash. It's an older team. There's still some guys you got to re-sign, but no one like world-breaking. Maybe the weirdest one is the 38-year-old Parise, who put the puck in the net last year. Do you keep him around for another year? How is he in the locker room? Because there's a lot of stuff coming out in Minnesota about how Suter and Parise were in the locker rooms. So there's questions, but I don't think there's anything major to answer, especially with a guy like Parise. If you want to move on from him, he's an unrestricted free agent. You don't have to re-sign him. But I think with their defensive structure, you got Sorokin in net. Sorokin's incredible. You got some guys that can put the puck in the net. Horvat will be there for a full season. So I think they're about the same, in all honesty. All right. Last one, I promise. Penguins. Penguins are going to come back with a pretty similar team. Most of the key guys are signed at least through this upcoming year. There are some questions. Do you re-sign Jari? Do you go out and sign another goaltender? Or do you trade for a goaltender? You got to fill out that depth scoring. Your top 6 guys, for the most part, are there. Jason Zucker, unrestricted free agent. Does he come back? Does that work for the team? What kind of goes on there? But I don't know. Penguins with Malkin, Crosby, Letang. Another year older, but they're all still very good players. My biggest concern is injuries. If you lose Malkin or Letang for a long period of time, and I know Letang was out quite a bit last year. Malkin played a whole season. That's not common for him. How does that affect your playoff chances? So it's very contingent on injuries, in my opinion, in Pittsburgh. I don't think they have the depth to necessarily recover from that. I know they have in the past with some of these role players stepping up and playing a big part, notably Evan Rodriguez a few years ago. But I got questions. I don't think they're going to set the world on fire, but I don't think they're going to be awful. I'd expect about the same this year from last year for the Penguins. All right, changing colors, finally. Capitals getting worse. I don't see them making the playoffs, which is tough. I don't know. I'm one of those guys that I want to see Ovechkin do well and be on a successful team. There are other players on that team I really like. But Nicholas Backstrom, is he a first-line center at this point anymore? He's like 35. He was injured a good portion of the year last year. I don't know how many games he played, between 35 and 40. But he was a minus 25, 7 goals. I think he had like 14 assists. Just rattling off numbers. Cool. But is he your first-line center at this point? You're looking to move Kuznetsov as like a cap dump. There are other cap hits that haven't aged all that well. So I don't know if they're going through a retool. The thing is, you have to add during a retool instead of just selling off, and it seems like they're more projecting in the direction of a rebuild, which I don't think you needed to do or really want to do with guys like Ovechkin and some of these veterans that are in their prime or the core that expect to win now. John Carlson, for one. Carlson had kind of an off year defensively. He's definitely a better two-way defenseman. This year was a lot of offense for him. Um, that's the Caps for you. I don't think they get better. I think they get a little worse. We'll see how long this lasts. I'm hoping it's not like a full-on rebuild for the Caps, but we'll see, I guess. Flyers, definitely getting worse. They still have a lot of hefty contracts on that team they need to move out. And that's not going to be easy. This is going to be probably a longer-term rebuild because of the position they were in when Danny Briere took over as GM. I got my Flyers jersey on. I'm happy they're finally committing to the rebuild. Like, oh my God. That's great. They need a reset, and they need to be perennial playoff contenders at the very least. That fan base is fantastic. I am hoping to get up to Philly this year for a game in Philadelphia because it's only a couple hours away from where I live. I'm a Bruins fan though, so like it kills me just wearing this Philadelphia Flyers jersey. But at the same time, I think right now is kind of the rough times for Philadelphia. I don't think there's a lot of light at the end of the tunnel this upcoming season and maybe even the season after. But a full-on rebuild, a full-on reset, moving on from some of these contracts will help quite a bit. I think they're still going to be tough to play against. You have Tortorella, a gritty coach behind the bench. You still have guys like Delorier. You still have kind of a tougher defense to play against. You have Carter Hart still. If not, you have an upcoming goaltender in Soderstrom and who they just acquired? Cal Peterson. Maybe he has a bounce-back year. So there's stuff there. It's not going to be an extremely boring team to watch, but they're not going to – I don't see them getting better when they're selling off. Last up, I got the Jackets way up. They're not going to have the year they had this year. The amount of injuries they had, Werenski out most of the year. They added to their defense. They might have too many guys on defense now because you still have Juracek. He was a top prospect. In the few games he played in the NHL, his stats don't look great. But the eyeball test would tell you he played very well, and he's probably ready to be a full-time defenseman in the NHL this year. My questions for them is, like, what are you doing with the offense? You got to figure out the offense. Right? You got kind of like 1.5 lines that can put the puck in the net, but like you got to put 4 lines on the ice. So I don't know. We'll see what they do this offseason. It's still early, but if they add pieces to that offensive core, if they add guys that can put the puck in the net, this team could be a fringe playoff team. I don't think they're at that point just yet. With the way the team currently is, I don't think they are a fringe playoff team. I don't think they'll be competing for a playoff spot in March and April. But I do have them getting a lot better because having those pieces back that you didn't have last year will make a difference. And you'll likely have the 3rd overall pick this year in the draft, and maybe that player comes in and plays a decent role on your team this upcoming season. So Metro Division projections, like I said, this is the most boring. I don't think there's going to be a whole lot of changes in this division. I think this is probably the most straightforward as well of all the divisions. You got 5 teams staying around the same as they were last year. Obviously, again, just want to reiterate, it's still June. It's the draft is in 6 days. Free agency hasn't happened yet. Trades are going to happen. Some qualifying offers are going to happen. There's a lot that's going to happen throughout the next few months before the season starts. So it'll be interesting to see, but this is kind of how I project. You got 3 teams aspiring to be cup contenders. You can make the case for the Rangers if you want to have them as cup contenders. I'm not going to argue with you. I think this last season was pretty telling for them. The Islanders, Penguins, probably fighting for that wild card spot. Caps, Flyers, Jackets, all kind of missing the playoffs. If the Flyers, the Jackets, if they add the right pieces, they could be right in contention with the Islanders and Penguins for that playoff spot. So we'll see. Appreciate your thoughts. Let me know what you think. If you disagree, if you think a team's going to get better or worse, or if you think something's off from what I'm saying, like, let me know. Drop those comments. I appreciate you. This is one of four, right? 15 minutes. So if I did the whole Eastern Division, it could be over a half hour, and nobody wants to sit through that. So, all right. I appreciate you guys, and take care. All right.